let's talk about the fact that until recently and still very, very infrequently do we see people with lived experience actually sitting on NIH study sections to decide who gets funding for their disease. So where we've got $30 billion of federal taxpayer money being spent to solve stroke and spinal cord injury and traumatic brain injury, and I'm focusing on the neuro ones, but everything.
Yeah.
And we have very, very rarely do we have people who actually have lived experience of the disease sitting in on these sessions and saying, this is an important problem for me, or this is not an important problem for me. I had a really great experience at an international Parkinson's disease conference where it was basically 1/3 patients or people with Parkinson's, 1/3 researchers, 1/3 clinicians. And the conversations, these intersectional conversations that were happening in this conference, where patients were standing up in the middle of a talk saying, we don't care about this symptom. Like, find a new thing to work on, because like this is not an inconvenience to our lives. Help us with tremor, help us with getting off the toilet, help it, like it was really,
that's amazing.
I'm being honest, but it was also,
I don't know how many anecdotes start with, I had this great experience at a Parkinson's conference.
Yeah, not many.
Yeah. But I think that's right. That word that you use there, which I haven't used in a long time, but that is so apt, is intersectionality. And, I think that there's like the people who founded the I Am ALS movement, they were politicians who the husband was then diagnosed with ALS.
Yeah.
And then he testified to Congress and went around to the politicians to drum up support. Now, if he had not had that intersectionality, they wouldn't have gotten that bill passed that assured extra funding coming into the ALS movement. And I think their name is Steve and Sandra, but I could be wrong. But
that sounds right to me as well. Yeah.
But they're pretty incredible. But you're right. Like, it's people who are at those intersectionalities. It's kind of like you talking about your certain toolkit, me talking about the access that I'm able to have across, media and science, and then, but as a gift, other things as well. But I think that's right. I think that takes those people who have that intersectionality, like as you know, because you were a star on the first episode of it, was Innovation Squared, which we did during COVID, funded by Amgen. And it was this idea that people who work on a molecular level don't often get to talk with people who are working on innovation on an external, more engineering-driven level, and that during COVID we were in these Zoom calls running through agenda where we would just be hitting things off and taking things off a list of things to do, and then jumping on another Zoom call and running through another agenda. But what we were missing were those in-between moments where we met people outside of our direct circle of influence or our direct team, right? And with our direct team, we are of like minds to some extent in the work, and we don't know what we don't know, and we're working towards innovation, but it's probably incremental. But if we're forced to have a conversation with someone, even within the same company, who works in a different section, but certainly with people outside, like if you're talking to relatives, etc., when you're talking about what you do as in terms of research, you have to do it to talk about it in a way that's relatable. And when you do that, you give them the opportunity to come up with free associations to other things in other industries that they can offer back to you as an observation that might then unlock something for you, or enable you to look across to the gaming industry and borrow that tool that they've got and they've spent decades working on, or the social media industry where they've kind of laser focused into how to get behavior changed, so that you focus on something more and longer, and you can borrow that a little bit. And I think that that's where we get that intersectionality, where we have those opportunities to have cross-industry conversations, is where we can really, more often even have these giant leaps of innovation, because we are breaking through our silo, looking at these other things that are happening in the world where people have worked really hard on these things and have absolute dominance in a certain field, but it's being used for a completely different purpose. So we just need to be kind of kept open to those experiences and have those conversations across groups to the patients, and hearing what they work with, what they like working with, what tools they like using that might be completely unrelated to the ones that you're using to treat them, that maybe you can integrate them somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I also think it's probably worth a shout out to some, a newer community that I've been working with, which is the, complex chronic illness community, long COVID, myalgic encephalomyelitis, Lyme disease, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, these sorts of conditions, which, well, used to be rare, and now post-viral illness certainly is not a rare disease anymore. It's affecting a large proportion of the US population. But it's for the longest time not been anyone's problem in mainstream healthcare. So interestingly, when I speak to this patient population, I go to them for scientific ideas, because they're reading widely. They're reading everything. This community has already adopted the posture of, no one is going to help me. Help is not coming. I'm going to help myself. And so they're reading everything from, metabolic and mitochondrial dysfunction all the way through to, what's happening with these new microclots that could be circulating in the body, and viral persistence and virology and stuff that I have no experience with. And the way that information is being is being communicated has really, it's turned on its head. Suddenly they're the experts who I'm like, hang on, start slower, use smaller words, and work me through it.
I love that.
And it's been it's been a great experience for me because I love learning. It's been a humbling experience because there's so much to upskill on in such a short amount of time. But it's been a very singular and unique.
There's a